Hello, Rosangla.
Hello, Leora. And Elisheva is here, I see also.
Yeah.
And Ruti. Ruti, are you hiding or are you somewhere? We only see the ceiling of Ruti, isn't it? Who else is there? Wait, because
Maya.
I'm watching on my tablet. Maya, yeah.
Maya Torres.
Both Mayas, no?
Yes. Shir.
Great. And Dani.
Ila. Hi, Maya.
How are you?
Hi. How are you? You're still in Israel, I see.
Yes, quite crazy. I mean, I had to work a lot and I was studying the basic program of Zul, so I couldn't do so much.
Which one?
Yes, he was teaching a lot.
Yeah.
So that was really,
yeah.
He's brilliant. He's now in a retreat, so.
This is the fast way to enlightenment, isn't it?
Yes.
I remember Geshe Sonam Rinchen at one point saying, because we were preparing the Vajrasattva retreat and, they had to do Lama Chöpa every day, or I can't remember, 35 Buddhas before each session. And I told Geshe Sonam Rinchen, I said, they're getting a bit desperate. And he said, yeah, Lama Chöpa, I know. He said, very difficult, a lot to do, but then a lot of merit and very quick enlightenment. This is what he said. So, I still remember that conversation I had with him in the library of the old, in the museum of the old library of Tibetan, what's it called? Works and Arts.
Yes, in Dharamsala, amazing.
He used to sit there every morning and then you could just pop in and say hello before the class. So that was always very meaningful, very touching how we would, take care of our little worries and thing. It was amazing how you could go and get advice, just like this. Just pop in, and if Gila is there, she will remember. Is she here?
Hello, Geshe-ma.
Anyway, Geshe,
I'm here, and
better shut up, babe.
I remember very clearly. Yeah. Actually, it was after his class 2. You could see him before and after.
Yeah, anytime, actually, isn't it?
Amazing.
Okay, should we start? Okay. Great. Let me just get my text. Great. Got that. Okay, so to continue, in the afternoon, we'll start with some prayers again. This was only a short break. Something I mentioned this morning, and I think it's really important to understand the whole mechanism of what we're doing here. It concerns the mind, that is the working of the mind. Usually, of course, we talk about the different types of awareness, in particular when it comes to the mental consciousness. We're also familiar with the idea of coarser minds and subtler minds, in particular in the Tantra context. But I'm not touching that. I'm not talking about Tantra here. Something I'd like to point out, and as I said, I already briefly mentioned it this morning, is that even within our current situation, so our mind right now, while we're awake, even without we're not meditating, we're awake, we're just doing what we usually do throughout the day. So we can say our mind is quite coarse. Coarse, as you may remember, means we can easily recognize it. We can understand anything that is coarse. Coarse means, or gross means, we can perceive it easily, we can understand it easily, whereas subtle means something that is hard to understand. That's how those two words, coarse or gross versus subtle, are usually explained. Now, when it comes to our mind while we're awake, first of all, you have the sense consciousnesses. 5 sense consciousnesses. There's no difference in terms of coarseness or subtlety. They always have the same degree of coarseness. They're easily recognized. They act or they function always on the same level. And while we're asleep, when the mind becomes really subtle, well, they're no longer active. Now, while we're awake, when the sense consciousnesses are active, if we look at the mental consciousness, and of course, if while we're awake, we meditate, the mental consciousness becomes subtler. And the sense consciousnesses, depending on our degree of concentration, are still there, but they're not active in the sense that they still have things appear to them, but there's no ascertainment, there's no cognition, there's no understanding of what the sense consciousness is, what actually appears to them. So really what's mainly active when we're meditating is the mental consciousness. And that is slightly subtler than the mind that is not meditating, that is influenced by the sense consciousnesses. Now let's look at the time when we're not meditating, when our sense consciousnesses are active. They don't just have things appear to them without any ascertainment, without any cognition of what appears. So at that time, I believe you can also differentiate between coarser minds and subtler minds, in that they're mental consciousnesses. So there's differences here with regard only to the mental consciousness, not with regard to the sense consciousnesses, that you have minds that are coarser than others. So, for instance, taking the example of our own death, being aware of our own death, that can be a coarse intellectual mind where, I don't know, I read something in the news and I hear, oh, this person's died, maybe a classmate, maybe 5 classmates have died, and I'm part of this class. So I suddenly have the thought, oh, it could be my term soon. That is a coarser type of mind, if you like, in the sense that we may be aware of the thought that it has arisen, and it's prolonged. It may last for a few seconds. That's pretty long for a single mind to be not disrupted by other minds. So that kind of mind, of course, is important, and that's the initial type of awareness that rises as a result of the meditation. However, we have also these subtler forms. So from the point of view of misconceptions, the subtler forms are these very short moments of thinking, I'm not going to die. And they are much deeper in that. They're harder to notice. So I even talked of the subconscious level. Unconscious level, I don't think exists, actually. Well, certainly not from a Buddhist point of view, because there's always consciousness. So there's no unconscious level. But there's a subconscious level where we are not as conscious. We're not conscious ourselves. Or it's below our actual awareness of these types of mind. Now, on that level, on that particular level, there are thoughts that pop up all the time, that arise all the time, that seem to suggest I'm not going to die. They seem to suggest things are going to be the same. And the more frequently they occur, of course, the more we become aware of them. We're pretty much aware of them, I guess, in our daily life that we have them. And still we believe, well, it's not the whole story, because I do believe I could die. I had that thought this morning. However, those coarser types of thoughts do not influence our emotions in the same way. The emotional level is much well, not deeper in the sense of positive deep, but much subtler. There's a lot more going on. We're just not aware. There's certain emotions we have, we don't even know we have them, which of course on a psychological level can lead to a lot of confusion and so forth. Now, a lot of what we do is focusing our attention to these subtler levels of emotions without being scared of them, without the sense of fear, but more with the sense of curiosity to get to know these types of mind. Now, that is described usually as mindfulness of the mind, of anything that may arise in the mind, to just be aware of it and just observe it with curiosity, without any emotional involvement, understanding all they are just thoughts popping up like clouds in the sky. Now, there are many different techniques that help us to do this. Don't need to go into them, but the point is here, meditation is a lot about, or internalizing the Dharma, applying Buddhist psychology is a lot about just getting to know the mind and realizing there are these levels we are little aware of, or maybe not at all aware of, that govern our emotions, and that takes away all the control we would like to have in order to, well, take control of our emotions, take control of our own life, but which right now we just don't have. And these methods here, this text, what it allows us to do is dig into these deeper levels, check whether I can get a sense of a resistance towards what is taught here. That's kind of the first step. Now, a lot of what we do as part of this class here, as I said, is not really that hard to understand. So a lot more emphasis is on going and taking it deeper right away. I'm aware there are some of you who would rather get more information, understand the Dharma, have more, hear things that you've never heard before. But this is part of the process to also hear things over and over again, because the more you hear it, the deeper you can go if you allow your mind to go to a deeper level. And when you go to a deeper level, then your understanding of other facts that you've never heard before will be deeper in turn. You'll understand them differently. It'll be a huge preparation. It'd be a huge help when you get to understanding emptiness, because you've already taken it to a deeper level. So that's why when His Holiness teaches, you've noticed recently, His Holiness says the same thing over and over. He does not try to he could, he's so eloquent, he could put it in ways that you've never heard it before, but it encourages us. It brings out this mind that wants to be entertained. Just recently, there was an event where some professor of psychiatry asked His Holiness questions, and His Holiness answers were very similar over and over again. And so he wanted His Holiness to say something different. I had the impression, I could be wrong, but the point was His Holiness said it over and over again. And I think His Holiness's message is, I'm not here to entertain you. If you want to hear it put into beautiful words and said differently every time, well, I'm not going to offer this. I want you to do this. This is what's important. This is what you need to do. Do just this. And so in this way, I think we learn, either we stop listening to His Holiness, but just His presence is so inspiring that a lot of people just want to be in His presence. And then they hear it over and over again, and they're able to actually, through this repetition, which is almost like a form of meditation, to take it onto that level. And that's what I would like you to do. With Corona, this is great. It's a great opportunity. A lot of other things that we can't do that keep us usually busy. So therefore, why not take the Dharma to this level as part of this class? Okay, this part I just wanted to explain. So let's deal with these very subtle minds that seem to suggest we're going to live forever. Let's get to know these types of mind through the process that is introduced, well, through the process of meditation here. One little point I want to make, and I have this terrible habit, I get confused with what I've said and what I haven't said yet. And sometimes I fail to say something because I feel, oh, I've said it before, but that was on a different occasion in a totally different setting. Now, what I didn't mention was, it is so important as part of the meditation we did previously, analytical meditation on the verses we covered, is after you've done this analysis, in whichever way you find comfortable, you may take what I say as a suggestion and go along with that, come up with your own thoughts. The point is, anything that was covered, anything that Aryadeva wrote about, to take that into consideration, analyze it, and at the very end, you come to some kind of insight, whatever that is. It doesn't need to be profound and overwhelming, no, but any kind of insight you come to, try to focus your mind on it. Just focus on that insight to such a degree that you also try to bring it to a deeper level. Let it sink in deeper into your mind. It's hard to describe. I'm talking about deeper, etc. here. Of course, those are physical terms. It's not literally about taking it deeper on a physical level, but of course, deeper into the subtler levels of our mind, which in turn, of course, influence our emotions, our behavior. Okay. Now returning to the text, verse 11. I like this one. 11 is great. We would like to live long, but dislike old age. Okay, we like to live long, but we dislike old age. Amazing. Your behavior seems right to people like you. So this is so contradictory. We maybe come across someone who's really old and think, oh, I never want to be like that. But we want to live an old, like we want to grow old. We don't want to die soon. We want to die sometime in the future, and without growing old, no way you're going to live a long life. So it's like this absurdity that no one wants to become old, but everyone wants to live a long life. I mean, that's like you don't want to have arms, but you want to have a complete body. I mean, it's like you can't have one without the other. Therefore, old age is just part of it. So now the author takes us away from just accepting death, but also accepting old age. I mean, come on, big deal. But of course, again, it's so hard, especially at this day and age, when there's so much emphasis on being young and beautiful, or being beautiful because we're young kind of idea. Okay. And again, it's bizarre. It's bizarre. Like I've noticed myself that my mom and I have no idea of anything that's going on around here, but people stopped looking at my mom when we go somewhere. Even my mom asks a question, they look at me as if my mom is too old to deal with it. They look at me, I have no clue. I'm like, Mom. And so they kind of pay some attention to her, but they go back to me. So it's amazing to watch that there is this sense, because she's old, elderly, she's like 83. She's 83 years old. So, I mean, she can't know. The younger person understands better, although she really understands. And I'm like clueless. Now, I notice this, of course, like our sense, like older people, of course, they're treated differently as if they were dement. Possibly in some cases, they don't understand any longer. So our reaction to older people, this we need to become more aware of. But also, more importantly, our own acceptance. Okay, I'm old. Big deal. I mean, like if I say to someone you're old, I mean that's an insult. But why is that an insult? I mean we're old the moment we were born. We started aging. So age anyway, it's relative. But okay, so the point is our obsession with keeping young. Really, it's just not realistic, and it causes similar sufferings to the suffering that are caused by our misconception of permanence when it comes to our own death. All right, so therefore it tells us here, we want to live a long life, but we do not want to grow old. I mean, how silly is that? So if you want to live long, accept your own old age, accept that you grow older. Then it goes on to say 12. All right, now it goes into a slightly different direction. So until 11, it was all about my own death. Now, dealing also with separation from others. So this is beautiful. This first verse deals with 4 aspects that I consider to be really important. They're all part of this understanding of understanding of impermanence, of the fact that things do not remain the same, even though from moment to moment it seems similar enough, and we don't notice those constant changes that do take place. And what it talks about is like the 4 aspects we're not aware of as part of this holding on to course type of permanence. So one is the fact that whatever is born has to die, but it goes up further. It continues on. Whatever goes up has to come down. So going up here doesn't literally mean you climb up a mountain, but it means in terms of status. You can have a high status in terms of your career, whatever you do. You may rise, you may have a lot of power, you may have a lot of great standing in society, great reputation, be honored, and so forth. However, you'll come down from that. And if it's at the moment of your death, It'll be gone. You're not that person any longer, so you lose that status at the latest at that point. But usually people are forgotten when they reach a certain age anyway. So a lot of famous people who were famous, who are still alive, well, they're no longer famous, where they no longer have their previous status. So whatever goes up has to come down. Whenever there's a meeting, there has to be separation. So we come together with people, but if there is a coming together, if we meet someone, well, it'll always end in our separation. The latest when we die. I mean, we separate then. If we both die, we don't share that experience of death in that being together there, where we individually all die. And whatever comes together has to disperse. So having different things come together, well, different people come together, a family come together, it'll disperse. If not in this life, well, definitely at the time of death. So those are 4 facts about life, and really important. They're mentioned in the sutras, and not all of them are spelled out in this verse, but definitely with regard to the fact we meet with people, we are with people, and we have to separate from them. So not only do we have to separate from our own life, our own body, which the first 11 verses deal with, but we also have to separate from those we love. And here, the author goes to the most extreme case, separating from a neighbor, separating from a friend, even separating from our parents is not as terrible as separating from our own children, because biologically, there's a sense I have to die before my children. And here it's described as a son who in ancient India was considered to be so important, so precious. So not a daughter is mentioned, but a son. But the point is here, it's just the cultural kind of context. But the point is here, taking the worst that could happen, the death of one's own child, one's own son in this case. So here it says, why do you grieve at death on account of your son and others? When the one that laments is a victim, how is that not reprehensible? Okay, now here what he's saying, let me just change this. Okay. Here it's actually already, well, going into the direction I said, like grieving another person. But we also need to we should grieve our own death in the sense we should be aware of our own death. Now, it'll take us, soon the text will take us, well, what about our attachment towards other people? Just kind of gently taking us in that direction. It's not saying don't grieve, etc. It's just kind of introducing us to our own misconception, holding on to permanence, holding on to the wish that is all the same, and kind of like allowing us to recognize that and allowing us to see how much suffering that causes. All right. So that's all that the text does. It's not saying don't love your child, don't grieve over it, etc. All right. But it's showing us our own mind is it's taking us in that direction. First of all, our own inability to recognize we're going to die. And if we don't die, at least we grow old. Just recognize it, accept it, let it be, let go of unrealistic expectations that we're going to live forever and that we're not going to grow old, etc. And then, of course, here, also to understand, okay, we may grieve another person's death, maybe even our own sons, but we should also be aware of our own. If we really grieve another person's death, well, become aware of our own death, because oftentimes people actually still ignore, despite the fact that someone close to them has died, that we still no sense of our own death. Now, I said until 11 it was just us, and now it's kind of taking us in that direction. Until verse 11 it was just all about our own death, but here it's like it's taking us slowly away from it. But 12 is still kind of saying, well, be aware, you will die. You may bury your own son, but don't believe you're not going to die yourself. All right, now that's 12, mentioning already the son's death. But then it goes on to say in 13, if unrequested someone has become your son, it is not unreasonable if he leaves without having asked. Okay, now 12 and 11. 12 just remind us of our own immortality once again, but taking our relationship that is definitely, of course, there's also great love involved, not to ignore. This is not to be ignored. As Holness, the Dalai Lama oftentimes talks about the greatest love you find in a worldly setting. In a worldly, so non-spiritual setting is the love of parents for their children. It usually doesn't go the other way around. That kind of love, and Aryadeva mentions that, the kind of love parents have for their children is not the same as children have for their parents. It's incredibly strong love. And Solness talks about this biological love, biological in the sense that we're born with that. It's innate to us, even as limited human beings, unliberated, non-liberated beings. That love we actually carry with us. Some people's love is stronger than others, but that's what we all have. And that is a very important love. But love here is the aspect of wanting this person to be happy and doing anything we could to bring this about. So this kind of love, being able to actually sacrifice our own life for that child, that aspect, that is called love. But it's mixed. Mixed doesn't mean you have one mind that's both love and attachment. That's not what mixed means. It means there are minds of pure love, this kind of love that parents instinctively or in an inborn way already have. And of course, there are different degrees depending on the circumstances, how one was raised oneself, and so forth. But in general, there's a general true concern for one's own child or for one's own children. That is a type of mind that arises again and again, and it governs our actions as parents, as good parents. However, there's also the attached mind. There's attachment to our children, and that arises at other times. And that is harmful. That causes our relationship, the relationship with our children, to suffer. It causes us great suffering when they do things we don't like, and so forth. Now, we need to distinguish between those two minds. One mind, beautiful. It shows our ability to love. It shows this is in the nature of our mind, because we wouldn't be born with this unless, well, it was part of our nature. This is something His Holiness uses to establish that love is in the nature of our mind. It is, we're born with that. This is the way the healthy child is raised. Parents have it naturally. Therefore, it's natural to our mind. And what it also shows is that this love can grow, in that when you have, and it can grow stronger. It can be developed through meditation more so. And even on a biological level, it can grow stronger so that it in envelope and like it in what's the word? Like it is directed towards more than just one person. Like you have one child, it's directed towards that one child. You have two, it's directed towards two. Now, if you'd end up having 50 children, well, if you get a few wives, that's definitely more realistic. But the point is, if you end up having many children, you can love them equally. So this love can grow stronger, and it can be directed at more than one person, which shows we can actually meditationally generate it towards all sentient beings. There's no limit. There's no limit. And that's why we talk about love knows no limit, in that if there are limitless sentient beings, you can love each one of them. And there's not like you can love 5, you can love 10, and that's the end of it. I'm exhausted, can't love any further. No, on a meditational level, it can increase forever. If you have hatred towards one person, you can hate that person. 2 makes it harder. And really hate everyone, I think that's impossible. It's just more a concept. It's not like you feel deep hatred towards each and every sentient being. Hatred is limited. Love isn't. Okay, but the whole point I'm making here is that there's this difference. There's this ability, of course, for us to love. We have the greatest love on a non-spiritual level towards our children, but also the greatest attachment. It comes along with this attachment. Now, the attachment is the problem. The attachment gives us so much suffering. In particular, it causes a lot of fear. Okay. Now, and this we're dealing with here. Now, regarding verse 13. What does it say? It says someone has become our son, and we didn't choose this person. We chose to have a child, possibly not in all cases, it's our own choice, but we chose to have a child, but we didn't choose the person. It was not like we got an Amazon kind of catalog or whatever, and like, I mean, even with even with cloning, if it was once possible to clone your child, from a Buddhist point of view, this child may have the same genetic makeup, may genetically be identical to yourself, but the mind will always be a different mind. You will not be able to copy the mind. The mind comes from a different individual. So although there may be similarity because of the genetic, well, the body that the person is born in, it's influencing the mind of that person, but nonetheless, it will be a different type of person. And that's the mental consciousness that enters the sperm and egg at the time of fertilization. Well, that consciousness does not come from the parents. That is a different individual, a different being. And that being was not asked. Well, maybe if it's a highly evolved Lama, may have chosen, but we have not chosen this child. So we've not chosen. That's the child that, because of our karma to a certain person, was born to us. And therefore, if we had no control over that, why are we surprised if possibly our child leaves without asking? As in, like, we have no control. We have no control who's born to us, and we have no control when this child is going to leave us. So again, to become aware, this is just nature. This is just a process of nature. To become aware, anyone could just leave us. Even our children, they could just leave us. So letting go of this thought, they have to be around us, they have to provide me with grandchildren. If they do, enjoy. But if they don't, let it go. All right? Just for our own sake, because it causes so much grief if our attachment, that which our mind desire, is not met. And here, in the greatest thing to let go is our attachment towards our children. But you can take it, if you don't have children, take the attachment towards your own teacher, possibly. We may be very attached to our own teacher. Well, this person became our teacher. We didn't ask to have that connection with that person. It just is. We have that connection. And even though we asked this person to be our teacher, but we didn't ask to have that connection. It's just there. We just, whatever the person said, we find helpful. And so we have to let go. At some point, we'll have to separate again from that teacher, from friends, from, anyone else we're attached to. I'm still a little bit confused by the third line. Okay, great. Someone said the third line, unreasonable if he leaves without having asked. Okay. So it seems unreasonable in the sense we don't expect it. We're like, this is not okay. There is a sense, this is not reasonable. I mean, my child is not supposed to die before me.
Sorry, I was referring to stanza 12, when the one that laments. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
All right. Oh, yes. So when the one that laments, I lament the death of another person, but I ignore my own death. Here in this case, I'm not saying we should lament our own death, but it's more like when we lament another person's death, the other person's death is in our face. However, even it's in our face, oftentimes it still doesn't cause us to become aware of our own death. First of all, to be lamented and then to deal with it, right? So therefore, it's objectionable. It's of course we should, grieving another person's death in general is, anyway, of course we should grieve. That's a healthy process. As long as we have attachment, that will arise, but it should also give us the opportunity to grieve, that is to face our own death and make the appropriate kind of preparation. The mind is like tofu, tastes like whatever you marinate it in. Okay. All right. Okay. Sorry, I just had this picture suddenly in front of me. I don't even know why this is there. There's a joke that just shows up. Okay. Anyway, the point is, in 12, it's just saying, well, be aware of your own death. I hope it's a little clearer now. I know it sounds a little weird. It sounds like lament your own death, but no, face your own death. Okay. Now 13, I hope is clear. Then 14, only because of your confusion, you did not notice your son's indications. His enthusiasm to go is shown by his growing old. Again, it needs to be explained a little bit. Now, let's not forget, when Aryadeva wrote these verses, of course, they were written in Sanskrit. They were composed in Sanskrit. The Sanskrit language, it's possible that things got lost as part of the language, that sometimes words had different meanings, dual, like 2 or 3 meanings. And of course, translating them into Tibetan and thereafter into English, these manifold meanings may have gotten lost. I can't tell. It was a lot about just, of course, sounding nice, sounding eloquent, so we won't forget. We will easily remember the words and thereby the meaning, and then internalize them, which is why sometimes the language may seem a little odd. But of course, once we understand the actual meaning, that's what we should reflect upon. So 12 is, I agree with you, what lament is like. Basically, it means, and in Tibetan it really says, to lament our own death, but to lament to become aware of our own death. All right. But continuing on to 14, well, it's because of our misapprehension of reality. It's our confusion. Confusion is a word that's often used to refer to ignorance. But of course, confusion or ignorance means a lot like just not knowing anything, not perceiving anything, just being kind of confused about it. But here, specifically in the Buddhist context, it means, in terms of our conception of reality, the way we perceive reality, it's diametrically opposed. It's exactly the opposite of what's actually there. Now, believing, for instance, things to remain the same while they're constantly changing. Hoping that and believing that. Now, it's because of that confusion, that misapprehension of reality, holding on to permanence, we don't actually see the signs of our own son impending death. What are the signs? Well, the fact that things change. Because they change, that is a sign for the fact that everything has to die one day. Okay, that the death happened earlier than we expected. Of course, it's just not the fact that things are changing. That is not necessarily an indication of the fact the son died really early. There were other causes and conditions that brought this about. But the underlying reason for death is that things change all the time. I've mentioned that on a few occasions, not in this context here yet, but again, even though this text talks more about coarser kind of impermanence, the fact that we change in that we die one day, other people around us die, that shouldn't surprise us, because we should also get in touch with this very subtle impermanence without which there couldn't be any changes. So the fact that we grow old, we don't grow old suddenly, like every Wednesday, or I don't know, once a month we suddenly have grown older. No, it's because from moment to moment we grow older. Moment to moment we move towards our own death, move towards aging, or we are aging, in fact, moment by moment. And we just, every now and then, we suddenly notice, but we just don't notice in between, and we're taken by surprise. Therefore, the fact that our own child was moving towards his or her own death, well, doing that, we just weren't aware of that. Therefore, again, to be more in sync with impermanence, subtle impermanence in particular, and be aware people could just die anytime. So he did not notice, it's because of the confusion that we did not notice our own son's death. Wait, let me just, okay, our own son's death. where did we get to? His enthusiasm to go is shown by his growing old. So when it says like he goes, what do we mean with his enthusiasm? It's like our own son is like happy to go. Well, what do we mean with our own son? Our own son, like what did we talk about? What is the person actually? Well, the person refers to a body and a mind. That's what we call the person. In other words, there's a label, the label person, the label you, the label, I don't know, Shacha, etc., whatever name we give to this person. We give this name on the basis of a mind and a body. And of the aggregates of that which makes up a person, it's the mind that's most important. We define the person, the way we describe a person or how we relate to a person mainly relates to the mind of that person and mainly relates to the mental consciousness. So the qualities such as being kind, being loving, being angry, being selfish, all that relates to the mental consciousness. So the way we look at a person, the main basis for our label person is the mental consciousness. Now, that mental consciousness also comes along with mental imprints. It comes along with imprints. So if you don't think of the person as just that person who doesn't want to die, but think of the person as that whole package, someone who's got the imprints, has the karmic imprints to die prematurely, well, then this mental consciousness is governed by these and enthusiastic about dying in that sense. Not really about the wish to die, but rather about the fact that these are the imprints left on the mind and they cause this person's death. So in other words, 14, again, it really means it's because of our holding on to permanence that we're not aware of subtle impermanence, and therefore the fact our son had a limited lifetime, was born with a certain lifetime or with certain karmic imprints, and therefore his life was growing shorter and shorter, and this was basically the karma that ripened in that moment. And the fact that our son grew, as in like became older from moment to moment, that showed us was moving closer towards his own death. Okay, so we are just not aware of that. This is part of our misapprehension of reality. And then it goes on to say, now it talks about the fact that we're just not in tune, we're not in touch with subtle impermanence and not with impermanence in general, the fact that anyone could die, however close they are to us. And that is just part of the nature of things. But on top of that, also our relationship with these people who are close to us, they're mired by, they're influenced, they're affected by a lot of negativities. For instance, on our part as parent, very strong attachment, which leads to expectations, which leads to frustrations and so forth. Then from the part of the son or the part of the child, it's also, well, not the same kind of love towards the parents, not the same type of attachment in general, but at the same time, negative emotions such as lack of gratitude, not really understanding to the fullest degree how much our parents have done for us. So oftentimes there's, not in all cases, we can't generalize here, but just there's a tendency, and it's interesting, this text was composed in the 2nd or 3rd century AD, that this was already an issue then, disrespect towards one's parents, not being aware or not remembering the kindness of our parents and so forth. Right? So therefore, on top of misperceiving impermanence, our relationships are influenced by afflictions, by afflictive emotions. In particular, when it comes to the closest possible loving relationships, parents are too attached. And as children, we lack gratitude and appreciation for what our parents have done. And therefore, it's actually easier to be reborn in the lower realms, in like states that are negative, because we accumulate so many negativities with regards not just to the people we don't like, but also with regard to the people we love. All right. Now, here, these are just examples with regard to 13. Sorry, not 13, but 15. Only because of our confusion. Yeah, so a son does not love his father as much as his father loves him. People in the world go down, thus a high rebirth is hard to find. Yes, so a son does not love his father in the same way. That is just the way it is. Parents would suffer a lot more in general by their son's death than the other way around. Also, as a way of expecting our parents to die before us. And I'm not saying it's always the case. I'm just saying in general. So people in the world go down. So this being the case, that shows that there's more attachment from the parent side as of the negative emotions and lack of gratitude and appreciation and respect from the side of the children oftentimes. And this is now true. We don't need to talk about father and son all the time. Also in our relationship with other people, with other people we're close to, people we say we love, and we do love, we don't just say so, we do love, we wish them to be happy, but to also become aware of the negative emotions that come along with them. If we're jealous when the other person is with someone else, well, it shows that we're too attached to them. We perceive them to be, to be our own possession and don't want them to be. So want them to be with this other person. So this love, this pure love, the wish for them to be happy is lacking in that moment, because if happiness meant they were with another person, well, we would just let them go. Therefore, to recognize that our relationships with other people can lead to, well, attachment, first of all, and the attachment also leads to a lot of anger, So oftentimes when the people that we're really attached to don't do what we want, it can lead to great hatred. This ends up in bitter divorces, in bitter, fights, parents, I don't know, battles over what one person can keep and what not, and disappointment and so forth. So very important to look at our own mind as part of this process, getting to know our own mind. Am I experiencing also lack of respect? Oftentimes, even with the person we're really close to, there's attachment, there's also love, but often a lack of respect. They have to be in a certain way, and we can't bear it when they act differently. We wouldn't react towards another person that way. When a person we don't know that well, we allow them to be different. We may find it annoying at times, but there's almost like a sense of respect, especially if we like this person. There's a certain distance we have towards this person, and that goes along with the respect. If they act in a certain way, okay, we let it go. It's much easier for us to let that go versus someone we're close to. We just cannot bear it. If it's a lover, if it's a partner, how dare they treat me like that? It's because this attachment we have towards them, not the pure love we also have, but at different times, it's this attachment which gives us, it's so strong that we want to control the situation. It gives us it leads to the wish to control the situation and control the other person's behavior, leading to, well, terrible fights we have with others. It can also be with a close friend, like a close friend, a girlfriend, a boyfriend, like we're not having a in any way sexual relationship, just a friendship. But even then, there needs to be a certain degree of respect for the other person. If our attachment is too strong, we cannot bear when they say things, and we easily end up fighting and so forth. Again, I think those are all aspects that come to the surface here that may not be totally obvious, but it's all about recognizing our emotions towards those people we're close to. The fact we have to separate one day, but even while we're still with them, lack of respect, lack of appreciation, lack of gratitude for what they've done, too strong attachment, jealousy, arrogance, possibly feeling we know it better than them, and so forth. There's a whole scale, and we need to recognize those because they harm our relationships, and of course they harm us in the long term, and even as part of our relationship. Okay, now this is going out of the way a little bit what is said here, but I don't think it's in any way contradictory to what it's in here. Okay, then it goes on to say, when he's disobedient, okay, goes on after reflecting on the relationship between two people. Well, then it goes on to say, when the son is disobedient, when the son is disobedient, no one will call him lovable. In that case, attachment is nothing but a transaction. All right. Now here the argument goes, and Gyaltsabje explains this. For instance, well, someone may argue, yeah, well, you love your son as long as the son does what you want. But actually, when the son is disobedient, then this love will go. But actually, that's not all right. We should love someone unconditionally. Because if the son is only lovable, if we consider the son to be lovable only for as long as the son does what we want the son to do, well, that's like a business transaction. I do something for you, you do something for me, I do something for you. And that again is not the right kind of motivation. So just stressing the fact that love, if we really love someone, it should be unconditional. And again, attachment has already been mentioned. Sorry, I'm just looking for something here in the commentary. Love was already mentioned. Attachment was already mentioned as a fault, as a faulty kind of attitude. So love, of course, is important, and love not like a business transaction. Love, the son is a good son, then I should love him, otherwise not. I'm actually looking at the text because, of course, the text uses beautiful analogies, and I'm saying the commentary, not the text itself, but not the root text itself, but the commentary by Gyaltsabje, and of course in Ruth's translation, they're mentioned here. Beautiful examples, and I just realized I didn't mention them at all, these beautiful examples here. Now, never mind. What are the examples mentioned here in this context? You could still read them on your own. Okay, what is the example? All right, there's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing really particular. So there's some examples are really helpful, but not all of them are necessarily here helpful. So I can't take anything. I can't find anything here. A king had a very beloved son who died, and his ministers. Yeah, so it's giving you the example of a king who was actually so upset with his son because he wasn't obedient, so he wanted him to die. So that's not the right kind of attitude. Of course, love should be unconditional. All right, and I guess that was clear with this verse. Let me just check our time. It's 11:20. Okay. Number 17, it reads, suffering caused by separation is quickly gone from human hearts. See, too, attachment's instability indicated by suffering's end. All right. Now, previously we've learned attachment is that which we need to be aware of. Positive emotions, those are the ones we should develop. Also with regard to our relationship with people we're close to, we should have unconditional love for them instead of attachment towards them only when they benefit us, as an example. Now, further, what's mentioned here is, well, this attachment, what is this attachment? Someone may argue, well, this attachment is really strong. It's part of who we are. So we can't just get rid of it. We cannot remove this attachment. But that actually isn't true, because attachment comes and goes. Now, even if we may argue, well, if a child dies, we will never get over it our entire life. Well, I agree with you. I totally agree with you. But the moment you die, it's gone. We forget. And this is sometimes hard for people to take. In particular, with regard to our sense of permanence, past and future lives are really difficult because we hold on to what we perceive right now, what we know. Well, that's what's there. The sense that our mind could continue, has been there before, will continue. It doesn't fit with regard to our sense of permanence. And of course, our modern life, there's nothing in our daily life that may suggest that. I mean, we usually come from a religious background that doesn't accept past and future lives. Possibly at home, it was never an issue. Our society, it's a very materialistic society where, well, unless we have a brain, we can't continue existing and so forth. There's so many reasons. Again, be very curious, very interesting to explore your own mind and check what keeps you from the idea of past and future lives, if that's difficult. Okay, just to go deeper into your own mind and see what could be the causes for this resistance. But anyway, that's without getting into this, let's assume there are future lives. Let's assume we continue on, and there was more before. As part of Buddhist psychology, so it's a huge part of this. Well, the fact that our children are only our children for a short time, if we think about it, there's such a strong sense, those are my children, they're mine. There's such a strong sense, this is my partner, those are my parents. But the fact that only for a short time, relatively short, because this lifetime is pretty short in comparison to what is ahead and what's behind us. Now, from that perspective, our attachment is very short-lived. In this lifetime, yeah, we're so attached to this one person. And of course, it was not there right from the beginning. This attachment grew, as we had children, etc. And so that is not that long-lived. You know, if we live to have children for 50 years and when we die, we don't even know they were our children. And then the person who was our neighbor's child in this life will be our child in the future. And the same is true for our partners. The person we're with in this lifetime, well, in our next lifetime, there may be a neighbor we hardly know, we hardly talk to. We believe in our relationships to be fixed. And this attachment seems to suggest permanence. Like I haven't really talked about this much, but if we look at our own mind, we have misconceptions and we have emotional responses to these misconceptions. The example, we have the misconception of permanence, giving rise to attachment towards things, holding on to them. But that attachment, that emotional response of holding on to, this is always going to be like that, holding on to this person, believing this person to give us happiness, lasting happiness. All this, it's tied into, of course, other misconceptions as well. But here in the context of talking about permanence, holding permanence is a huge factor giving rise to attachment. But attachment in turn also deepens our misconception of permanence. So the more attached we are, the more we have the sense, oh, this is mine and will always be mine. Well, unfortunately, attachment is not stable in that way, steadfast, because the moment we die, we forget. We make new relationships, even within this lifetime it happens. But as I'm saying, it can quickly go and it doesn't last long. So the bonds we have out of attachment, they keep changing. Therefore, attachment is nothing but a transaction. It's just that was wrong. Suffering caused by separation is quickly gone from people. C2, attachment's instability, indicated by suffering's end. So the different kinds of sufferings that each moment of attachment causes, well, that also has an end. Although we constantly suffer, but if you look at our own life, there are different types of sufferings. Every day, the aches and the pains and the worries may be similar, but similar implies they're not the same. So yesterday's suffering is yesterday's. It's gone. Today, the causes that gave rise to today's suffering, there are different ones, and they have an end. It's because of our attachment that we suffer. And because we continue on with the suffering, for the attachment, they cause new moments of suffering. But these new moments of suffering, they all have their end. So today's suffering is gone today, tomorrow's there'll be another one. So it shows attachment basically comes and goes, and what it causes also comes and goes. Suffering has an end. And what it implies here too is that we can totally get rid of attachment. We can overcome attachment. We can overcome suffering, because we can get rid of attachment at some point. All right. Let me just give it. All right. So there's an example giving in the commentary, for instance, that we always have new things come, and the good thing is that there's the saying, when one door closes, another one opens. Oftentimes we want to hold on to certain things, believing if I don't have this, I cannot be happy. But our experience in life should actually show that, well, as it says, one door closes, another one opens. That sometimes it can even be better than before. And what Aryadeva really is teaching us is letting go. It's all about letting go. Allow your mind to be affected by impermanence, by the fact we may die, the people around us may die. But when it says initially in the text, when it says every meeting ends with separation, every birth ends with death, every coming together, every kind of assembly ends with dispersion, and every going up ends with coming down again. The good news is that that is also not an end in itself. Of course, we also meet oftentimes the same people again, just in different circumstances and different forms. This is also to be remembered. Unfortunately, we only take into consideration one aspect, the fact that we get together with someone, and then we ignore the fact that it has to end. But then that end is also not an absolute end, because of course we'll meet with people again. In fact, the people we meet now, bringing in what's very important, of course, compassion and love, well, these people will meet again, and we've connected to them in this lifetime. We have a karmic connection with them. And once we learn to purify our mind, we can actually benefit all these beings we have karmic connections to, which is why we generate the wish to become enlightened for the welfare of all sentient beings, for the simple reason that we have certain connections with people. And some people, if we don't have the karmic connection, well, we first have to create that. But those we already have connections with, in the long term, our children, our enemies of this life, our parents, we can actually, at some point, if we work towards it, spiritually benefit in a very profound way, by, of course, becoming enlightened and then guiding those sentient beings to the same state. Now, that's also important, to not take that, to ignore that. And I will bring compassion a little bit more. It's not part of this text so much, but actually, which it tells us in the commentaries, the way we should use this is first to apply it to ourselves, but then also to apply it towards others in terms of compassion, of course. But we haven't gotten there yet. So let's just continue on a little bit with some of these verses. I hope I'm not going too fast. I'm going pretty quickly here, but I want to finish some of these verses, at least some part of it, over these 2 days, to then, of course, in the future be able to continue with it. All right. Now, having said all this, there'll be time to ask questions anyway. Suffering caused by separation. Yeah, we did that. Getting a little confused here. Is quickly gone. So understanding that attachment also doesn't continue on, we can actually totally eradicate it. Then 18, knowing it is of no benefit. Knowing it is of no benefit, still you have injured yourself. You make yourself a hypocrite, which also is improper. Now, this actually takes here there's again, it's something that needs to be known. It's in this context. Well, someone may argue it is good to suffer when your child dies. It is good to have that kind of suffering. That's a convention. That's expected of us to react in that way. And actually, well, that makes you a hypocrite, because I mean, in some cultures, you kind of pull out your hair, you beat your chest, and you actually hurting yourself as a sign of grief, and you're crying and you're lamenting, etc. Now, again, here is this kind of unnatural, like a way that actually harms us. So in this case, of course, being a hypocrite, just having to pretend we're grieving and kind of getting ourselves into that space of mind. And again, what's the point of that? So there's no benefit to injure yourself just because it's expected of you. It makes yourself a hypocrite, which is also improper. So in other words, basically, if we have natural grievance, again, that comes out of a misapprehension of reality, understanding that this attachment doesn't last that long, so may as well let it go now, plus pretending or kind of believing this has to be like that. Well, it doesn't have to be like that. You just become a hypocrite if you harm yourself, if you do this purposely, if you do this on purpose. And then 19, it says, people in this world, they wonder, full as if it were of suffering. Why fill with suffering people who already suffer? So there's no use, therefore, to have relationship with other people out of attachment. Basically, you might think, oh, it's part of a relationship. It's good to have attachment. We need attachment. And of course, in terms of psychology, they talk about attachment as something good, as a kind of bonding. But let's not forget, we just use the same word, but the meaning is very different. Attachment is an emotional state of mind that's harmful. Well, it doesn't perceive reality as it is. It exaggerates the good quality of the object of attachment, and it causes suffering. One thing we don't want. That's why here it's not about bonding as much as this sense that this other person, we can't live without them. Why? Because can't live without them because, well, because of our attachment, the sense we can't be without them. We believe, and it's a very interesting process. Now, having talked so much about attachment, to analyze how does attachment work? We've had the opportunity here in this text, of course, to identify it, possibly if you're taking it to that level, to get in touch with your own attachment, recognize that, and see we have attachment towards the people around us, which doesn't mean we shouldn't love them, but maybe we can at least reduce the factor of attachment and make our relationship in that way much healthier. And we can even totally eliminate attachment. I mean, there are high lamas who've definitely overcome attachment, but they still have families. They still love their children, but it doesn't come out of an exclusive love towards them. It's love towards all sentient beings and a sense of responsibility for particular humans, in this case, their own children. Now, it is possible to have these relationships. The great lay lamas who did have families, they show us how to do it. And the quality of their relationships and the well-being of their family is, of course, affected by this type of relationship. But let's look, like I said, let's look at attachment. What is so interesting is our attachment comes out of the wish, of course, to be happy. We all want to be happy. It's a natural wish we all have, and something that we all deserve. Everyone deserves to be happy, no matter who. Now, the point is that we have basic misconceptions of reality. Now, permanence is just one misconception, but even deeper than that, and I initially talked about it at the beginning of classes, I talked about the fact that deeply ingrained in our mental consciousness is the sense that phenomena exist in and of themselves. We totally ignore the fact that it's basically us classifying things in a total random way. They could be classified in a totally different way, but classifying them comparing them, seeing similarity to something else, and creating these categories. That's just on a conceptual level. This is a man, this is a woman, etc. I, others. We create these ideas basically on a certain basis, which we could very differently also create, but just as part of our mind, as part of a society, we have certain conventions. We create certain conventions. This is good, this is bad, etc. But it's all in relation to something other than the object itself. There's no intrinsic good or bad. And also when it comes to, well, it's good, it's desirable, because in relation to how I feel towards it, my mental consciousness has a certain emotional response, and therefore I consider the other object that triggered that response as bringing me happiness. But actually, it was the happiness that my own mind experienced. So the happiness is with my own mind. And it was only in relation to that that I now labeled the other person as positive. But then I forget that that was just a process of labeling that took place in relationship to how I feel, my response to that person, and of course, connected to many causes and conditions. And rather, I now believe this happiness lies within this person. My response of happiness was not a response I had, triggered by many causes and conditions, one of them being the other person, also due to my karmic connection with that person and so forth. No, I'm totally unaware of that. I believe happiness lies within that person. This person carries within him or her my happiness, which means I have to be around that person because they're carrying my happiness. Without that person, I couldn't have happiness because they carry that happiness within them. That was just me labeling initially. It depends on many causes and conditions. And although I can say, yeah, conventionally they may give rise to that, but there's a lot of other things that give rise to that. And it's mainly my own mind that has the ability to experience happiness. But this is where we go wrong, believing it's intrinsic in the other person to give me happiness. It's something within them, and I couldn't be happy without them. And we hold on to this being the same. We want it to be the same. We want it to trigger the same degree of happiness, and we're disappointed when it doesn't happen. Now, this is an incredibly complicated, deep level of how attachment works, of how it interacts with our misconception of permanence. And this is something for you to discover in your own mind. Just listening to someone to talk about it, that's only the first step. It's so important to take this to our own life and recognize that our suffering does not come from outside. It's only our response to what happens outside. And the response is internal. It's our own mind. And it's our misconceptions, such as holding on to permanence, which give rise to other emotions, which give rise to suffering. Suffering is not out there. Suffering comes from within, which the good news is, of course, it gives us so much power in that the only thing we can learn to control is within our mind. This we can learn to control. The outside we cannot, but we can train our response based on reality, and whatever happens externally, if our response is in accordance with reality, there's no way we can suffer. All right, but a lot of work is to be done because our mind is full of a complicated web of misapprehensions supporting other misapprehensions, misconceptions, and emotions, and it takes a lot of time and patience. All right, let's be aware of that and go back to the text. Okay, now if our relationships, 19, just to summarize it, our relationships, we have a lot of problems. We have different relationships and we have a lot of problems as it is. Why add more to suffering in that we have attachment to other people, allow other people and support other people in their attachment, and thereby cause even more suffering? Suffering is already there, but we can decrease suffering by working with our own mind. We fill other people with suffering, of course, due to our own attachment. If meeting is a joy to you, why is parting not also a joy? Okay, going back again to the idea of meeting with people versus separating from them. All right, so we've already had that parting causes suffering and meeting causes happiness. This is why it's a problem. It's intrinsic in things, but actually, well, we should be aware that you can't have meeting without separation. So meeting and parting, those are inseparable, and it's only complete. Those two are only complete if you have both aspects. Take that into consideration. There's no meeting if there wasn't for parting. I mean, because we met people, other people had to part. Right? Does that make sense? So every situation, like even there wouldn't be any birth if there wasn't any death. Those two are inseparable. So every time something, I mean, in every situation, in every day, a new situation arises, which means the death of an older situation. As I said previously, death and birth are not absolute in that we call birth the moment when our mental consciousness is connected to this body. That we call birth. And death, we call the process of this mental consciousness separating from the body. But our birth went along with a death. We couldn't have been born if previously we didn't separate from the previous moment, the previous body. So death was involved in our own birth. We couldn't have been born if there wasn't death. In fact, each moment is a moment of birth of a new situation and the death of the old situation. In every moment, we can give the same name. New situation arises, birth of a new situation, which of course means the death or the cessation, the stoppage or the stopping of an older situation. So you can't have a new situation without the old situation stopping. So it's beautiful. It's just part of it. We couldn't have something new if the old wouldn't go. In that way, to be accepting of both. And also meeting with people, well, unless other people separated, there couldn't be meeting. So we meet with someone because we separated from someone else, even just on the daily basis. I'm just saying on the daily basis. That on the daily basis, when we meet one person, well, we have to separate with someone else and then we meet them again. And our lives are like that too. The people we lose, well, we lose them to then meet them again at some point in the future. So we have to part from people and to just be obsessed about the parting, but not realizing that meeting and parting are inseparably linked. In fact, they're just relative. In relation to meeting one person, it's a meeting, but in relation to making that meeting with this person possible, we cannot be around this other person. Well, there's also parting. So there's meeting and parting, both present, right? Meeting with a new situation, parting from an old one. In that case, in that sense too. Therefore, we should be happy about both. It's part of it. You can't have one without the other. So if meeting is a joy to you, why is parting also a joy? It's part of it. New opportunities. It's one thing ends and something else can arise. Do not meeting and parting both seem to go together? Yes, of course, they both go together. Can't have one without the other. Wow. I mean, how did time go? Talking about holding on to permanence. I've just talked for an hour and 15 minutes and I only went through 10 verses. Well, now we've done 20. Was this, I mean, we've started at 11, right? No, 11:30, that's right. How much longer do we have? 10:30. We started at 10:30.
Yes, we have 15 minutes.
Oh, it's only 15 minutes. Okay. Well, it is what it is. We will start the next session. Please remind me. The next session we'll have the opportunity to ask questions, if there are any questions. And now I would like to just briefly meditate on what we've learned today as part of the verses 11 to verse 20, to internalize what we've just heard in such a way that it actually affects our life, which is most important. That's the whole point of this practice or of this text. All right. let's take a moment to just about a minute to just watch your breath. Once your mind is a little calmer, I start the meditation. So now let's become aware that not only do we have to give up our life, possibly sometime soon, but also our relationship with other people will come to an end. At some point, we have to separate, even from those we are the closest to. So we have no freedom over who becomes close to us and who we have to separate from. Even their own children. Our own parents or friends. It's due to our own karma that they have come into our own life. And it's due to our attachment and holding on to permanence that we greatly suffer upon their parting. And likewise, it's due to our attachment that our relationship with the people we're close to are affected negatively. Our lack of respect or appreciation, our understanding of the other person, all that is due to a strong sense of attachment. Towards what we want and what we want from that relationship. So even our loving relationships that are so meaningful in our life can become the causes of future suffering. Since they may give rise to jealousy, a wish to control the other person, anxiety, and so forth. It's so important to distinguish between unconditional love towards another person versus attachment that comes with expectations. And to a certain degree, the wish to control the situation. So see whether there is a way in which you could bring more unconditional love into your relationships, more respect. For the other person, and reduce holding on to this person, holding on to our attachment for them. Through letting go. Mainly to understand that meeting and parting are inseparable. That impermanence means that each moment is the death or the end of one situation, and the birth or the beginning of a new situation. And meeting with one person means parting from another. So to be just as accepting of parting from someone as we're accepting of meeting with this person. To accept the fact of life that everything is constantly changing. And now conclude this meditation. Whatever insight you've had reflecting on this, spend some time to focus just on that insight and allow this to sink deeper into your more emotional mind. And then also to dedicate whatever positive potential we've accumulated this morning to study about and meditate on one of the most important Buddhist texts. May that become one of the causes that enables us to get to know our own mind better, to reduce our misconceptions, and eventually to generate a mind of enlightenment, realize emptiness, that we're able to totally purify our mind from all obscurations and for the welfare of all sentient beings, become a fully enlightened Buddha. So for the welfare of all sentient beings, let's dedicate our virtue in that way. And also do the shorter dedication prayers. Eduardo, could you it's the shorter dedication, not Shantidevas, but there's a shorter one as part of the little pamphlet that Varda prepared. Okay, let me just look at my own version. Okay, I think I've found it. Dedication. Oh no, it's towards the end of the text. For everyone else, don't lose don't lose your object of meditation, but here we are. So we dedicate now with this mind of dedication we just generated with the following words. Just as the brave Manjushri and Samantabhadra too realize things as they are, also I dedicate all these merits in the best way, that I may follow their perfect example. As all the victorious Buddhas of past, present, and future praise dedication as supreme, so now I dedicate all these roots of virtue for all beings to perfect good actions. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. Okay. Great. So having finished this fast part, I just need to check what time are we going to meet again? How many hours from now on?
We have 2 hours.
2 hours. Okay, so that means
2 hours or one? Oh, sorry.
1 hour.
2 o'clock. 1 hour. Sorry.
At 2 o'clock Israeli time. Okay, great. 1 hour from now on. Great.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Please get some rest, but don't forget, please keep to a certain degree as part of these 2 days, hold on to what you've learned today. Don't let it totally go, and see how you can bring what you've learned into your own life, even if it's just an hour. Okay, so enjoy your lunch.
Thank you, Geshe.
Thank you, Geshe.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe.
Thank you, Geshe.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.